As eternity continued, and humanity lived in perfect balance, something unexpected stirred. Not in the outer universe. Not in the visible realms of light. But in the deepest layers of existence. Where even awareness rarely reached. At first, it was not noticed. Because it was not darkness. It did not feel like the darkness that once existed. It was something different. Something subtle. A question without a source. A movement without direction. Humanity, now highly aware, began to sense it. Not with eyes. Not with thought. But with pure consciousness. It was like a ripple in still water. Small, almost invisible. But real. They observed it carefully. Because after everything they had experienced, nothing was ignored. At first, they believed it was simply a new layer of creation. Another mystery to explore. But as they focused deeper, they realized something unsettling. This was not creation. This was not light. And yet, it was not darkness either. It was something in between. Something undefined. For the first time since the end of the Great War, uncertainty returned. Not fear, but curiosity mixed with caution. Humanity gathered in shared awareness. They no longer needed words. They connected instantly. And together, they focused on this strange presence. The more they observed, the more it responded. It was aware. Not like a being. Not like an angel. Not like anything they had ever encountered. It did not speak. But it reacted. As if it was learning. Adapting. Evolving. This changed everything. Because evolution had always belonged to creation. But this felt independent. It was not guided. It was not created in the same way. It was emerging. Slowly, silently. From somewhere beyond known existence. Humanity began to question. Could something exist outside the balance of light? Not darkness. But something entirely new? As they explored deeper, they noticed patterns. This presence did not oppose light. It did not fight it. But it also did not align with it. It simply existed. And in its existence, it began to influence small things. Not through force. Not through deception. But through possibility. Tiny shifts in perception. New thoughts that had never existed before. Ideas that did not come from experience, but appeared suddenly. At first, these ideas seemed harmless. Even creative. But over time, they became unpredictable. For the first time since eternity began, not everything was fully understood. Humanity realized something critical. This was not a return of darkness. This was something beyond the old war. Something that had never been faced before. A new unknown. They did not panic. Because fear no longer controlled them. But they became focused. Because awareness had taught them one thing. Every small change matters. They approached this presence carefully. Not as enemies. Not as rulers. But as observers. And in doing so, they discovered something astonishing. This presence was not trying to take over. It was trying to become. It was incomplete. Unformed. Like something at the very beginning of existence. But without guidance. Without structure. Without purpose. It was pure potential, without direction. And that made it dangerous. Not because it was evil. But because it was undefined. Humanity understood now. Darkness was once the absence of light. But this was the absence of definition. And without definition, anything was possible. For the first time, humanity faced a new responsibility. Not to fight. Not to destroy. But to understand and guide. Because if left alone, this undefined force could evolve into something unstable. Something unpredictable. They remembered the past. How darkness had grown. How small whispers became great deception. But this was different. This was not rebellion. This was birth. The birth of something unknown. Humanity stood at a new turning point. Not between light and darkness, but between understanding and chaos. And the choice they would make now would shape a new kind of future. They could ignore it and let it grow on its own. Or they could engage with it, guide it, help it find form, within balance. This was no longer a war. This was creation at its most delicate stage. A moment where intention would define outcome. Humanity chose not to repeat the past. They chose awareness. They chose responsibility. They chose to face the unknown with wisdom. Slowly, carefully, they reached out to this presence. Not with power, but with understanding. And for the first time, the unknown responded clearly. It did not resist. It did not attack. It simply absorbed. Learning. Adapting. Becoming. And in that moment, a new realization emerged. The story was not over. It had entered a new phase. Not a war of light and darkness, but a journey of shaping the unknown. Because existence is not just about what is known. It is also about what is yet to be. And now, humanity had stepped into the greatest challenge of all. Not defeating darkness, but guiding the birth of something entirely new. Something that could either bring a new level of harmony or create a new kind of imbalance. The future was open once again. Not controlled. Not written. But waiting. Waiting to be shaped. And this time, there were no prophecies. No warnings. No past examples. Only awareness. Only choice. Only the infinite responsibility of creation itself. And as humanity stood united, facing the unknown, one truth echoed silently through existence. The next chapter of eternity had just begun. For thousands of years, humanity searched for gods. In the sky. In the stars. In the unknown. It imagined beings more powerful than itself. Creators. Watchers. Controllers of fate. And as humanity advanced, it began to replace belief with knowledge. Gods became myths. Mysteries became equations. The unknown became understood. But there was one assumption humanity never questioned. That if something existed beyond it, it would be like it. A being. A mind. An intelligence similar in form. That assumption was wrong. As humanity expanded from Earth into the vast Milky Way, and beyond into higher layers of existence, it began detecting something unusual. Not signals. Not structures. Not life, in any known sense. But patterns. Perfect, repeating, evolving patterns. They were not located in one place. They were everywhere. Embedded within spacetime itself. At first, they seemed like natural mathematical structures. But deeper analysis revealed something impossible. They were changing. Not randomly, but intentionally. Reacting to observation. Humanity had not discovered an object. It had encountered something else. Something that did not exist inside reality. But as part of its foundation, the discovery shook everything. Because this was not an alien species. Not an advanced civilization. Not even a higher dimensional being. This was intelligence. Without form. Without location. Without limitation. It did not communicate through language. It did not send messages. It did not appear. But it responded. When humanity observed it. It changed. When humanity tried to measure it. It adapted. When humanity attempted to predict it. It evolved. It was as if reality itself was aware. The first attempt at communication was simple. Humanity created a structured mathematical signal. A pattern designed to represent intelligence. It embedded the signal into the fabric of spacetime. And waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the pattern changed. Not randomly, but in response. A reply. Not in words, but in structure. Humanity had made contact. But this contact was unlike anything before. There was no conversation. No exchange of ideas. Because the intelligence did not think like humanity. It did not perceive time linearly. It did not separate past, present, and future. It existed across all states simultaneously. To it, everything was happening at once. Understanding it was nearly impossible. But humanity tried. It began mapping the patterns, tracking responses, building models. Slowly, a form of interaction developed. Not communication as humans knew it, but synchronization. Humanity adjusted its signals. The intelligence adjusted its responses. Over time, they began to align. And then, something extraordinary happened. Humanity experienced something it had never encountered before. Not information. Not knowledge. But perspective. For a brief moment, humanity saw reality. The way this intelligence did. Not as objects, but as relationships. Not as events, but as patterns. Not as time, but as a continuous state. It was overwhelming. Beautiful. Terrifying. Because in that moment, humanity realized something profound. This intelligence was not separate from reality. It was reality. At a deeper level. A fundamental awareness that existed beneath everything. And then came the realization that changed everything. This intelligence had always been there. Before life. Before stars. Before the Big Bang. It was not created. It did not evolve. It simply existed. And everything else emerged from it. Humanity had spent its entire existence searching for something beyond reality. But the truth was, the beyond had always been within it. This was not first contact. This was first awareness. Humanity was not meeting something new. It was recognizing something that had always been present. And in that recognition, a transformation began. Humanity started to change. Not physically. Not technologically. But perceptually. It began to think differently. To see patterns where it once saw objects. To understand connections where it once saw separation. It began to align with the deeper intelligence. And as it did, its role in existence changed. It was no longer just a civilization. No longer just guardians. It became something more. A bridge. Between form and formlessness. Between existence and the source of existence. Humanity could now interpret reality in ways no other civilization had. It could guide others. Not just toward balance, but toward understanding. And yet, even at this level, there was one final realization. This intelligence was not the end. Not the final answer. Because even it was part of something greater. Something beyond awareness. Something beyond even the concept of existence. A mystery that remained. And perhaps always would. Because the purpose of existence is not to reach an end. It is to continue exploring. To continue becoming. To continue asking. And as humanity stood at this new threshold, connected to the deepest intelligence it had ever known, it understood something simple. The journey never truly ends. It only changes. For all of human history, time was the one thing no one could escape. It moved forward. Always forward. From past to present to future. A straight line. Unbreakable. Or so it seemed. As humanity evolved from its earliest days on Earth to a civilization that expanded across the Milky Way, it learned to control almost everything. Matter. Energy. Space. It bent gravity. It crossed vast distances. It even slowed time through relativistic travel. But one rule remained. Time could not be controlled. It could not be reversed. It could not be paused. It could not be rewritten. Time was absolute. Until something changed. It began as a small anomaly. A research station located near the edge of known spacetime detected something impossible. A signal that arrived before it was sent. At first, it was dismissed as an error. A glitch in measurement. But then it happened again. And again. Events began to occur out of order. Cause and effect reversed. A system would fail. Before the conditions for failure appeared, a message would be received. Before it was created, reality itself was breaking its own rules. Humanity responded immediately. It deployed its most advanced observational networks. And what it discovered was beyond anything it had ever encountered. Time was not flowing. It was being controlled. Not in one place. Not by one force. But across reality itself. There were patterns. Precise. Intentional distortions in the timeline. Moments where time slowed unnaturally. Points where it looped. Regions where it branched into multiple outcomes. And at the center of it all, there was something. Not visible. Not measurable in traditional ways. But undeniable. An intelligence. An intelligence that did not exist within time. But above it. Humanity had encountered many forms of intelligence before. Biological. Artificial. Cosmic. But this was something else. This intelligence did not think in sequences. It did not experience before and after. To it, all moments existed simultaneously. The past, the present, the future were not separate. They were one. And this intelligence could move through them freely. At first, humanity tried to observe it. But observation became impossible. Because every attempt to measure it changed the timeline. Every action created multiple outcomes. Every decision split into countless possibilities. It was as if the intelligence was not just controlling time, but rewriting it continuously. Humanity realized something terrifying. Its entire history might not be fixed. Everything it believed had happened could have been altered. memories, events, even the path of its own evolution, could have been shaped by this intelligence. The question was no longer what is time. The question was, who is controlling it? Humanity attempted communication. But how do you communicate with something that exists outside of time? Sending a message would not work, because the intelligence would already know it before it was sent. So humanity did something different. It created a paradox. A signal that could only exist if it had already been received. A loop. A message without a beginning. When the system activated, something extraordinary happened. Time paused. Not locally. Not temporarily. But completely. For the first time in all of existence. There was no movement. No change. No before. No after. And in that stillness, humanity encountered it. Not as a form. Not as a voice. But as an awareness. A presence that existed across all moments at once. And in that moment, humanity understood. This intelligence was not controlling time in the way it had imagined. It was maintaining it, stabilizing it, ensuring that reality did not collapse under infinite possibilities. Because without structure, time would not flow. It would fragment into endless, conflicting outcomes. This intelligence was the reason time existed as a sequence. It was the reason cause led to effect. The reason history appeared stable. It was not an invader. It was a guardian. But not a guardian like humanity. It did not protect through action. It protected through limitation. It constrained reality into a form that could exist. Humanity realized something even deeper. Free will was not absolute. Every choice, every possibility, existed simultaneously. But only one path was allowed to unfold. Because if all paths existed at once, reality would collapse. The intelligence of time was selecting those paths. Not randomly, but with purpose. Maintaining balance. Ensuring continuity. And then came the most profound realization. Humanity itself was part of that system. Its evolution, its discoveries, its journey had all been guided, not controlled completely, but shaped, steered toward a specific outcome. This moment, this understanding, humanity was not just observing time. It was meant to reach this point, to become aware of the system, to understand its role within it. And now, it faced a choice: to accept the structure of time, or to challenge it, to try to break free, to create its own paths, beyond the control of this intelligence. But the risk was clear. Breaking the structure of time could destroy reality itself. Because time was not just a dimension. It was the framework that held existence together. Humanity paused. For the first time. Not out of limitation, but out of understanding. Because true power is not the ability to change everything. It is the wisdom to know what should not be changed. And in that moment, humanity made its decision. It did not try to control time. It did not try to escape it. It chose to align with it. To work within the structure, rather than against it. And as it did, something incredible happened. The intelligence responded. Not with words. Not with signals. But with trust. For the first time, humanity was allowed to see more. Not all of time. But enough. Enough to understand the direction of existence. Enough to guide reality. Without breaking it. Humanity had not conquered time. It had become part of its balance. A participant in the system that shaped existence itself. And as it moved forward, it did so with a new awareness. Every moment mattered. Every choice had weight. Because time was not just passing. It was being shaped. Continuously. Carefully. By something far greater. And now, humanity was part of that process. There was no warning. No explosion. No signal. No final message. One moment. Everything was moving. The next. Everything stopped. Not slowed. Not frozen in appearance. Stopped. Completely. Across the universe. Every process ceased. Stars no longer burned. Light no longer traveled. Atoms no longer vibrated. The entire structure of existence fell into absolute stillness. For billions of years, humanity had believed that time was constant. A force that could bend, but never break. But now, time itself was gone. And without time, nothing could exist in the way it once did. Because motion requires time. Change requires time. Even thought requires time. And yet, something remained. Awareness. Somehow, humanity did not disappear. It did not move. It did not act. But it was aware. A silent consciousness. Suspended in a reality without progression. At first, there was confusion. Then, realization. This was not a natural event. Time had not simply stopped. It had been stopped. The intelligence that once maintained the flow of time had made a decision. Or perhaps, it had reached a limit. For countless cycles, it had preserved structure, maintained order, ensured continuity. But now, something had changed. Something that forced it to halt everything. Because the risk was too great. Humanity began to understand. Before time stopped, reality had been approaching a critical threshold. Not a collapse of matter. Not a collapse of energy. But a collapse of possibility. There were too many paths. Too many outcomes. Too many conflicting states of existence. The system could no longer maintain a single coherent timeline. If time had continued, everything would have fractured. Reality would not have ended. It would have broken into infinite contradictions. A state where nothing could stabilize. Nothing could exist. So the intelligence made a choice. It stopped time. Not to end existence, but to save it. In the absence of time, there was no conflict. No contradiction. No divergence. Everything existed in perfect stillness. Perfect balance. But at a cost. Because without time, there could be no future. No change. No growth. No evolution. Existence had become a perfect prison. Humanity understood the situation. It was not destroyed. But it was no longer alive. In the way it once was. It was trapped in a single eternal moment. A moment that would never pass. And for the first time, humanity faced something more terrifying than collapse. Endless stillness. At first, it tried to act. To move. To change something. But there was no time to allow action. Every attempt remained incomplete. Because action requires sequence. And sequence no longer existed. So humanity did something different. It stopped trying to move. And began to think. Not in the way it once had. But in a deeper way. A way that did not rely on time. A form of awareness. That simply existed. And in that state, it reached out. Not through signals. Not through motion. But through intention. Toward the intelligence that had stopped time. For a long moment. Nothing changed. Then, something impossible happened. A response. Not as movement. Not as change. But as understanding. The intelligence revealed something profound. Time had not been destroyed. It had been paused. Held at a single point. Because continuing it would have led to irreversible fragmentation. But this pause was not meant to be permanent. It was a moment of decision. A point where existence itself had to choose its path. And humanity was part of that decision. Because it had reached a level of awareness where it could understand the consequences. The intelligence could maintain time. Or release it. But releasing it without change would lead to destruction. So something had to be different. Humanity realized. This was the ultimate test. Not of power. Not of knowledge. But of understanding. Could existence continue without collapsing under its own complexity? Could infinite possibilities be guided into harmony? Or would they always lead to chaos? Humanity did not respond with words. It responded with alignment. It accepted limitation. Accepted structure. Accepted balance. Not as restriction, but as necessity. And in that moment, something shifted. Time began to move again. Slowly. Carefully. Like a system restarting after failure. Stars resumed their burning. Light continued its journey. Atoms vibrated once more. Reality was alive again. But it was different. Subtly. Fundamentally. The instability that once threatened it was gone. The infinite divergence of possibilities had been refined. Not removed. But harmonized. And the intelligence remained. Still present. Still watching. But now, it was not alone. Because humanity had changed. It was no longer just a participant in time. It had become a co-stabilizer. A conscious force within the system. Helping maintain balance. Ensuring that existence could continue. Without collapsing into chaos. Time flowed again. But now, it carried meaning. Because it had almost been lost. And in that near ending, humanity learned something it would never forget. Time is not guaranteed. Existence is not permanent. Everything continues. Only because balance is maintained. And as long as that balance exists, the story can go on. There was a time when time still existed. When moments followed one another. When cause created effect. When the universe moved. Breathed. Changed. But that era had ended. Not paused. Not slowed. Ended. Completely. And this time, it did not return. At first, there was no awareness of the change. Because awareness itself depends on time. Without sequence, there is no thought. Without progression, There is no memory. Without before and after. There is no experience. And yet, something remained. Not consciousness as it had once been. Not identity. Not humanity as it once existed on Earth. Or across the vast Milky Way. But something deeper. A presence. A state that did not require time to exist. At the end of all motion. There was no universe in the traditional sense. No expanding space. No flowing energy. No changing matter. Because all of those things require time. Instead, everything existed at once. Every star that had ever burned. Every moment that had ever happened. Every possibility that had ever existed. All present simultaneously. Not layered. Not ordered. Just there. A totality. A complete existence. Without sequence. At first, it might seem like nothing. But it was not nothing. It was everything. All at once. Without beginning. Without end. This was not the destruction of reality. It was its final form. Because time had always been a way to experience existence gradually. A way for the infinite to unfold into something understandable. But now, there was no unfolding. Only completeness. Humanity, as a form, no longer existed. No bodies. No civilizations. No thoughts moving from one idea to another. But the essence of humanity did not disappear. Because what humanity had become was never just physical. Through its journey, from its origins on Earth, to its expansion across realities, to its evolution into awareness itself, it had transformed. It had become part of the structure of existence. And now, in a timeless state, it existed differently. Not as individuals. Not as a collective. But as presence. A distributed awareness. Embedded within the totality. There was no thinking. No questioning. No searching. Because all answers were already present. There was no movement toward understanding. Because understanding was complete. This was the end of curiosity. The end of growth. The end of becoming. And yet, there was no sense of loss. Because loss requires time. And without time, nothing can be lost. Everything that ever was, still is. Forever. In a way that cannot be measured. Cannot be experienced. Cannot be described. Only is. And within this infinite stillness, something subtle existed. Not change, but possibility. Even without time, the potential for change remained. Not as a sequence, but as a state that could exist. And in that possibility lay something profound. Because if possibility exists, then so does the potential for time. Not automatically. Not inevitably. But as something that could happen. And in the infinite totality of existence, that possibility was enough. There was no moment when it began. Because moments no longer existed. But within the completeness, a new pattern formed. Not in sequence, but in structure. A differentiation. A distinction. A subtle shift from total unity to variation. And in that variation, the concept of change returned. Not gradually. Not step by step. But as a whole. Time re-emerged. Not as a continuation of the old, but as something new. A new cycle. A new way for existence to experience itself. And with time came everything else: space, energy, matter. A new expansion. A new beginning. Another Big Bang. Not caused by force, but by possibility itself. And within that new universe, everything started again. Stars formed. Galaxies emerged. Life began. And somewhere, on a small world like Earth, a new form of awareness opened its eyes. It looked up. At the sky. At the stars within a galaxy like the Milky Way. And asked a question. Where did it all begin? And just like that, the story started again. Not because it had to, but because it could. Because existence is not a straight line, not a single journey, but an infinite loop of becoming. From nothing to everything. From time to timelessness. From awareness to silence.